How's it going, everybody? It's Peter here. Tonight I'm hanging out in the garage for a little bit. I apologize about the sound quality. I'm sure that it's a little echoey, but you're gonna have to bear with me on that. There's nothing I can do about it right now, so let's just roll with it. I wanted to share a story with you all tonight that kind of came, not full circle, of course, but maybe a semicircle. Just a cool story about influence in life and fishing, and it has to do with somebody I met a number of years ago. So we'll take you back to that time, which was 2016, or 2015 rather, so 6 years ago. And I was a freshman at school here at college, and I just moved down from the North Country here to the South, and I didn't have many connections. I didn't really know too many people, aside from people at school, people I was meeting there. So I didn't really have a huge network of folks to kind of turn to and lean on rather. And it took a little bit to build that, of course. And now that I'm a little bit better established, it's there. But this is sort of the story of one of those first people that kind of came into my life in that way. And I used to fish in the campus pond, the campus lake, which has a lot of nice fish in it, and had many great memories out there, catching big bass and crappie and catfish and all that. But when I first started fishing out there freshman year, I used to see this old man, with a frankly pretty pitiful little white dog. And they would walk so slowly, and it wasn't because the old man was slow, it was because the dog was slow. This thing was deaf, blind and deaf, who knows. It was, and it probably, I don't know, it had 2 feet, it might have had 3 feet. The dog was in rough shape. But this old man, who clearly could outpace the dog pretty easily, would slowly make his way around the pond, around the lake, in the evening time, and I'd see him out there. And it would sort of always bring a smile on my face, partially, just almost, sort of in comedy because of this dog, because it was such a strange little creature. But also because I saw that this old man was kind of caring for this old, kind of decrepit animal that if the man hadn't been there taking care of it, it surely would not last long. But I would fish out in the pond, and eventually the old man started to he introduced himself to me one night or otherwise, and we became acquainted, and found out his name was Johnny, and that he lived in the area, and he'd been walking around the lake for 40 odd years, and fished in the lake many times, had known a lot of previous students at the college who were into fishing, and it just seemed like a really well-connected guy. He was very well-spoken, one of those people that speaks softly but carries a big stick is how I would describe him. He spoke very softly, but he had this sort of commanding demeanor about him, that when he spoke, that you should probably listen up because he had something to say. And he just carried that demeanor with him. It wasn't anything that he did in particular that sort of brought that about. It was just the way he presented himself, the way he acted. And he really didn't, mince words. He was to the point, sort of unlike myself, and got his thoughts across really eloquently and really succinctly, and just sort of commanded a respect. And that was something I really admired from even the first or second time I met him. I just sort of realized that was something about him, and kind of latched onto that as this is somebody that is worth listening to and worth hearing their story and what they have to share. So I would see him, all the time, every other night, every few nights, a couple times a week, walking that little dog around the lake as slow as can be, and we'd sit and chat, or I'd be casting and he'd stand and chat, and he was hard of hearing, so I'd raise my voice and we'd kind of shout at each other next to the lake. And he had to be, I would have put him at 80 when I met him, or 78 when I met him. He was an old man, and but he had this youth about him, and this spirit that really was sort of impactful. I would say it was not only impactful but also kind of inspiring. It was a great thing to see, and so the more that I was fishing in the lake, and the more times I saw him walking around, the more we became acquainted, the more we became friendly with each other, and eventually he invited me fishing, and I wish I could remember the first place he took me fishing. It was one of the first places I remember specifically was we drove down through this crazy neighborhood on this dirt road, and by crazy, I mean, this is crazy just by my standards. To those folks, it's perfectly normal, but this was like, it was a whole hodgepodge of farm animals and double wides and fallen trees. It was a crazy little insane hill down to this pond. And this pond was maybe only 3 acres or so, but it had an earthen dam, and the water was super clear. And I remember catching a few fish there. Caught one really nice one, and the whole time, we're chatting, and he's kind of, sharing fishing advice and life advice, and I'm sort of telling my story as this kind of naive 18-year-old, and he's sort of listening and interpreting, and then speaking his truth to me, and there was never a shortage of words between us. We always had really strong, friendly communication. Another time he drove me up into the mountains to this mountain pond where a friend of his lived, and man, the fishing was terrible. We didn't catch anything, I caught 2 small bass, but it was tough fishing. But we had such a nice time just visiting and chatting and talking fishing and life, and it really, between seeing him all the time walking around the lake and him taking me fishing those times, really formed a strong connection. And he invited me over to dinner with his wife one night, and she cooked us a great meal. And then I saw a house that he bought for his either his son or his daughter, I can't remember now. A beautiful house up in the hills, and I met his grandchildren, one of which had just been in a motorcycle accident, motocross accident, and he was down in the basement in a wheelchair. And I can't remember if he'd broken both his arms, but he'd broken a leg and an arm at least. He might have been. I think he was double slinged up, one hard cast, one sling, broken leg, and he was down there in the garage working on the bike that he'd crashed, getting it ready for when he could race again. And that sort of, I guess that spirit was in Johnny too. That sort of go-getter, toughen up mentality was in him, sort of that hardworking, passionate kind of mentality, and that was something that I really admired. So we spent a lot of time together fishing and visiting by the campus lake, and eventually we just kind of fell out of touch, I guess. I'll tell you the story of the last time I saw him. We'd run a little, I didn't even recall who'd put it together. A group of us, led by one of my older friends. We put together a little competition on the campus pond, a little fishing competition, a Saturday morning, and we started there. We started at 8 o'clock or something. Had a little kickoff breakfast, maybe a little Bojangles breakfast or something, and we'd given Johnny the okay to come participate, even though it was just us students. He felt like he felt like he had a rightful place in that tournament, so we invited him along, so we got finished up with the tournament about maybe 11 o'clock in the morning or noon after 3 or 4 hours of fishing, and we all kind of reconvened at the parking lot. Johnny wasn't there, and we all shared stories of how we caught our fish and what we'd done and everything, and then we all just kind of went our separate ways. And I realized in hindsight that we kind of left Johnny out on the pond. We were just in the parking lot next to the lake, but he was out there somewhere around the backside of the pond, still fishing, and we hadn't kind of let him know that we were done and going our separate ways. And I always felt bad that we kind of left him out there, even though it wasn't me that left him out there. It was a group of us that sort of just moved on with our days and leaving him to fish. And maybe he took he didn't think anything of it, perhaps, but it sort of left me with a bad taste in my mouth. For myself, I was kind of like, oh, that's kind of a crappy thing of me to do, to leave Johnny out there. Not let him know that the rest of us were kind of packing it up for the day. And I'm sure he would have liked to have heard the stories of how we were catching our fish, and I would have liked to have heard what he had to say too. But I never heard from him again. I think it must have been shortly thereafter that I lost his contact. I lost the phone or something, and we just fell out of touch from that point on. So I guess that was the last time I'd seen him was during that little tournament that we put together. And it was, we'd fished probably less and less up until that point, so it wasn't like just abruptly we stopped fishing and stopped talking. I'd sort of gotten busy with school and things, and we just sort of fell out of touch. But I did feel bad after that Saturday when we kind of left him at the pond, And yeah, and so I finished up school, and I didn't see him walking around the lake anymore. And finished up school and moved back home up north, and I came back down here, and I thought I saw him one time. I don't know if I was at the store or at the park or what I was doing, but I thought I'd seen him at one point, and but I didn't reach out, or I didn't say hello, and I didn't know if he was alive, to be honest with you, because like I said, he was probably 80 or late 70s when I met him. So he was, pushing 80, 85 at this point. And so I didn't know if he was still around, because I hadn't seen him walking the dog by the lake. But tonight I walked into Walmart, in center aisle, right there he was. I saw for sure, oh, that's Johnny, there he is. And so I grabbed my cart and I walked right up to him, because I was, I thought, man, I didn't even know this man was still alive. So walked up and said hello, and sure enough, he recognized me, and he said, oh man, Peter, I thought you'd moved back up to Pennsylvania. And he was close, but now I'm back down here. And so I explained that. I moved back down in January, and I've been down here fishing and working. And he was glad to hear I was still fishing, and we were able to kind of hit it off right where we left off. He's talking about his Crestliner and how a trolling motor blew up on him, and how he'd like to get one with spot lock or an anchor system. And he's like, but $1,800, too much for trolling motor. And I was like, oh man, I hear you there. And so we sort of had a laugh, and just got back to old things. Started talking about crappie fishing and the bass fishing on Hartwell and local stuff like that. And it was really nice to reconnect with him and show and sort of just share with him that I held no, I didn't want him to feel like I had abandoned him as a friend, and I was glad to see that he hadn't abandoned me as a friend after that Saturday where we sort of left him hanging. And it was just really special to see him again. It was really, really nice. And it just made me think a little bit about, influence and character of people, and holding on to those people that you respect and admire. And Johnny was one of those people in a time when I didn't have connections, or I wasn't very well established here in the South and in this part of the country. He was one of those first people that kind of reached out, extended a hand, had me over for dinner with his wife, and showed me his property and his family and his fishing holes and all that, and sort of cared about me in a way that he was like a grandfather kind of figure in a time when there was very little reason for me to encounter a grandfather kind of figure, being a freshman in school, being a freshman in college. So I guess I just wanted to share that someone like that can have a deep impact on you, and then reconnecting with them years later, it can be a really profound experience. So we exchanged phone numbers. I actually left my phone at home charging, because Walmart's just a stone's throw from the place. And we exchanged phone numbers, and he said, are you renting an apartment? I was like, yeah, I'm renting. And he's like, man, you should really talk to my wife. She can get you in a house for cheaper. If you're looking to buy a house, he said, my wife could get you in one for cheaper than you're paying in that apartment. And I said, I'll let her know that I'm here in town for a while, and that maybe that's something I'll look into. So I'm sure Johnny and I will be in touch, and I'm really looking forward to having him out on my boat to do a little fishing. Love to connect and sort of know how his life has been, and share what's going on in mine as well. But I guess the takeaway from this video is just hold on to those folks who mean something to you in your life, who are important to you, who have an influence in fishing or in life or otherwise, and keep those people around, because that's a positive thing to have somebody like that in your life. And I regretted letting the connection I had with Johnny kind of slip away, but I was really glad to run into him tonight after 4 or 5 years of not seeing him, and reestablish that connection. So I just want to share that story and hopefully provide a little bit of thought for you all on how important those fishing and life connections can be. So cherish those people around you, and keep a line in the water, and we'll talk to you soon. Good night.